The mystery finally cracks wide open on WWE Raw, February 2nd, 2026. Bron Breakker unleashes pure chaos as the masked attacker steps into the light and pays the ultimate price. What began as shadowy ambushes ends in a brutal, no-mercy dismantling that sends a clear message to the entire locker room. Secrets don't survive when Breakker is hunting. This explosive confrontation rewrites the power balance on Raw. Every slam, every roar from the crowd, and every second of destruction raises one question. Was this revenge, a warning, or the beginning of something even darker? Watch the full highlights and witness the moment WWE Raw changed forever. The lights dimmed across the arena as Monday Night Raw rolled into its most anticipated segment of the evening. February 2nd, 2026, would become a date etched into WWE history, not for a championship celebration or a legendary return, but for something far more visceral and shocking. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, their collective energy creating an atmosphere thick with expectation. For weeks, they had been watching a mystery unfold, a shadowy figure attacking wrestlers backstage, striking from the darkness and disappearing before anyone could unmask the perpetrator. Tonight, all of that was about to change in the most violent way imaginable. Bron Breakker had been a target. More than that, he had been humiliated. The masked attacker had struck him twice in the previous weeks, ambushing him when his guard was down, hitting him with foreign objects, and escaping into the night before Breakker could retaliate. For a man like Bron Breakker, a second-generation powerhouse who had built his reputation on raw strength and intimidation, these attacks were more than just physical assaults. They were insults to his pride, challenges to his dominance, provocations that demanded a response. And Bron Breakker is not a man who lets challenges go unanswered. The first attack had come 3 weeks prior, immediately following a match where Breakker had absolutely demolished his opponent. He had been walking backstage, adrenaline still pumping through his veins, when something came crashing down on the back of his head. The cameras caught only a blur of motion, a figure in all black with a mask obscuring their face, wielding what looked like a steel pipe. Breakker had dropped to one knee, stunned but not unconscious, and by the time he had shaken off the impact and looked around, his attacker had vanished. Security footage showed nothing useful. The masked figure had known exactly where the cameras were and had moved through their blind spots with practiced precision. The second attack had been even more brazen. Breakker had been in the ring, microphone in hand, addressing the cowardly assault and promising retribution to whoever was responsible. His words were fire and fury, delivered with the intensity that has made him one of the most feared competitors on the Raw roster. He had challenged the masked attacker to face him like a man, to step into the ring and settle things properly instead of hiding in shadows like a coward. The crowd had been eating it up, chanting Breakker's name, feeding off his intensity. That's when the lights went out. Total darkness engulfed the arena for perhaps 5 seconds, though it felt like an eternity. When the lights came back on, the masked figure was in the ring behind Breakker. Before he could turn around fully, he was struck across the back with a steel chair, the metallic crack echoing through the stunned silence of the arena. Breakker went down hard, and the masked attacker hit him twice more with the chair before security could flood the ring. Once again, the figure escaped, this time disappearing through the crowd, vaulting over barriers and vanishing into the concourse before anyone could give chase. The frustration on Bron Breakker's face in the aftermath of that second attack told the entire story. This wasn't just about physical pain or even the attacks themselves. This was about control. Someone was making him look weak, making him look like he couldn't protect himself, making him appear vulnerable in a business where perception is everything. For a competitor like Breakker, who had worked tirelessly to establish himself as an unstoppable force, these masked attacks were undermining everything he had built. WWE management had announced that they were investigating the incidents, that they were reviewing security footage, that they were doing everything possible to identify the masked attacker and ensure the safety of their performers. But Breakker had made it clear that he didn't want management's help. He didn't want security to handle this situation. He wanted the masked coward for himself, wanted to deliver his own brand of justice, wanted to make an example that would ensure nobody ever thought about attacking him again. The social media landscape had been ablaze with speculation. Who was behind the mask? Theories ranged from returning legends to debuting NXT stars, from Breakker's former rivals seeking revenge to completely new faces looking to make an impact by taking down one of Raw's top stars. Every wrestling podcast dedicated segments to analyzing the attackers' build, their movement patterns, trying to discern their identity from the limited footage available. Some fans created elaborate conspiracy theories involving multiple attackers or complicated storylines stretching back months. The mystery had captured the wrestling world's imagination in a way few angles do. Throughout the past week, Breakker had been a man possessed. Backstage interviews showed him pacing like a caged animal, his eyes constantly scanning his surroundings, his muscles tensed and ready for action at any moment. He had become paranoid, aggressive, confronting anyone who looked at him sideways. Other wrestlers gave him a wide berth, sensing that he was on a hair trigger, ready to explode at the slightest provocation. The normally confident and controlled Breakker had been transformed into something more dangerous, more unpredictable, more violent. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Earlier in the day, WWE had released a statement on their social media channels. The masked attacker had agreed to reveal their identity tonight on Monday Night Raw. They would step into the ring, remove the mask, and face Bron Breakker in a match. The stipulations were simple and brutal. No disqualifications, no countouts, and the match would continue until one competitor could no longer continue. It was essentially a street fight with no rules and no mercy, exactly the kind of environment where Bron Breakker thrives. The announcement had sent shockwaves through the wrestling community. Why would the masked attacker willingly step forward? What could they possibly hope to gain by revealing themselves and facing Breakker in his element? Was this confidence or stupidity? Did they have a plan, or were they simply answering the call of their own ego? The questions multiplied faster than answers could be found, and the anticipation for the segment reached fever pitch. As the show progressed through its earlier segments, the tension in the arena continued to build. Every entrance caused fans to wonder if this might be the masked attacker making their way to the ring. Every backstage segment was scrutinized for clues. The commentators kept the mystery alive, speculating endlessly about who might be behind the mask and what their motivations could be. They ran packages recapping the previous attacks, showing Breakker's increasingly frustrated responses, building the narrative of a warrior pushed to his absolute limit. Finally, the moment arrived. The arena lights shifted to a dark red, bathing everything in an ominous glow. An unfamiliar entrance theme hit the speakers, something aggressive and distorted that nobody recognized. The crowd rose to their feet as one, phones held high to capture whatever was about to happen. The entrance ramp remained empty for several seconds, the music building in intensity, the anticipation becoming almost unbearable. Then the masked figure appeared. They walked slowly, deliberately, savoring the moment and the attention. The mask was the same one they had worn during the previous attacks, a black tactical style covering that revealed nothing of their face or identity. Their body was covered in dark athletic gear that gave away little about their build or physique. They carried themselves with confidence, showing no fear or hesitation as they made their way toward the ring where their reckoning awaited. The crowd was a mixture of boos and curious murmurs, everyone straining to get a better look, to find some identifying characteristic that might give away who was beneath the mask. The commentators were going wild, their voices rising with excitement and speculation. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the revelation that would answer weeks of questions and presumably ignite an explosive confrontation. The masked figure climbed into the ring and stood in the center, arms spread wide as if embracing the moment. The music cut abruptly, leaving only the sound of the crowd's reaction filling the arena. A microphone was already waiting in the ring, and the masked attacker picked it up slowly, deliberately building the tension even further. But before they could speak, before they could say a single word or make any grand pronouncement, Bron Breakker's music hit like a thunderclap. The crowd exploded into cheers and roars of anticipation. This was what they had come to see. This was the confrontation that had been building for weeks. The unstoppable force was about to meet the mysterious object, and everyone in the arena knew that violence was inevitable. Breakker appeared at the top of the entrance ramp, and the look on his face was absolutely murderous. There was no posing, no playing to the crowd, no traditional entrance pageantry. He was there for one reason only: destruction. He began walking toward the ring with purpose, his eyes locked on the masked figure who stood waiting for him, microphone still in hand. The masked attacker finally spoke, their voice distorted through some kind of modulator to prevent identification. They talked about how Breakker had become complacent, how he had been allowed to dominate for too long without being challenged, how someone needed to humble him and show the world that he wasn't invincible. They spoke about opportunity and making a statement, about how attacking Breakker had been a calculated decision to get attention and create an opportunity that would otherwise never have come. But their words were cut short as Breakker suddenly broke into a sprint. He covered the remaining distance to the ring with shocking speed for a man his size, sliding under the bottom rope and charging at the masked figure before they could even drop the microphone. The talk was over. The time for words had passed. Now came the violence. The masked attacker tried to defend themselves, throwing a quick punch that Breakker easily blocked. He grabbed them by the throat, his powerful hand wrapping around their neck, and drove them backward into the corner with devastating force. The impact shook the ring, and the crowd's roar reached deafening levels. Breakker wasn't wrestling. He wasn't working a match. He was fighting, brawling, unleashing weeks of pent-up frustration and rage on the person who had dared to attack him. The referee had barely had time to ring the bell before Breakker started delivering brutal punches to the masked attacker's midsection. Each blow landed with visible impact, doubling the attacker over, forcing the air from their lungs. Breakker showed no mercy, no hesitation, no intention of giving his opponent any room to breathe or recover. He had promised destruction, and he was delivering it in the most violent way possible. He pulled the masked figure out of the corner and whipped them across the ring with incredible force. They hit the opposite turnbuckles so hard that they bounced off and staggered forward, right into Breakker's waiting arms. He lifted them effortlessly and delivered a belly-to-belly suplex that sent them flying through the air before crashing down on the canvas with brutal impact. The sound of the body hitting the mat echoed through the arena, and the masked attacker's body convulsed from the shock of the landing. But Breakker wasn't interested in pinfall attempts or traditional wrestling offense. He pulled the attacker up again, not allowing them even a moment to recover. His face was a mask of pure rage, veins standing out on his forehead. His jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. He delivered a devastating clothesline that turned the masked figure inside out, their body rotating completely in the air before crashing down in a heap. The crowd was going absolutely wild, chanting Breakker's name, feeding off the raw violence on display. This wasn't a wrestling match in the traditional sense. This was a beating, a systematic dismantling of someone who had made the fatal mistake of thinking they could attack Bron Breakker and get away with it. Every move was delivered with maximum force, every impact designed to inflict as much damage as possible. Breakker grabbed the masked attacker by their gear and literally hurled them over the top rope. Their body crashed to the floor outside the ring with a sickening thud, but Breakker was right behind them, following them to the outside with clear intent to continue the assault. The no disqualification stipulation meant there would be no countouts, no referee intervention, nothing to stop this from becoming as brutal as Breakker wanted it to be. He picked up the masked figure and drove them back first into the ring apron, one of the hardest parts of the ring structure. The attacker's back arched in pain, their body going rigid from the impact. But Breakker wasn't done. He delivered a series of knees to the midsection, each one driving deeper, forcing more air out, breaking down his opponent's ability to defend themselves. The commentators were trying to call the action, but even they seemed somewhat shocked by the one-sided nature of the beating. They had expected a competitive fight, perhaps some clever strategy from the masked attacker that might explain why they had been confident enough to accept this match. Instead, they were witnessing a complete and total destruction, a masterclass in overwhelming force and controlled violence. Breakker cleared off the announce table with one violent sweep of his arm, sending monitors and papers flying. The crowd recognized what was coming and their reaction reached new levels of intensity. He grabbed the masked attacker and lifted them onto his shoulders in a power slam position, then drove them through the announce table with devastating force. The table exploded on impact, collapsing completely, leaving the masked figure lying in the wreckage, barely moving. But even this wasn't enough for Breakker. He pulled his opponent from the debris, ignoring the referees who were trying to check on them, ignoring the concerns about whether they could continue. This was about sending a message, about making sure that everyone in the locker room understood what happened to people who attacked him. He rolled the masked figure back into the ring, following them in to continue the assault. Inside the ring, Breakker stood over his fallen opponent, breathing heavily from exertion but showing no signs of fatigue or mercy. The crowd was chanting for him to remove the mask, to finally reveal the identity of the person who had caused so much chaos over the previous weeks. Breakker seemed to hear them, nodding slowly as he reached down and grabbed the edge of the mask. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The arena seemed to hold its collective breath. Cameras zoomed in close. Commentators stopped talking, letting the moment speak for itself. Breakker pulled at the mask, and it began to come free, slowly revealing the face underneath. The face that emerged from beneath the mask sent shockwaves through the arena. It was someone nobody had expected. A wrestler who had been out with an injury for months. Someone who had been completely off everyone's radar as a potential suspect. The crowd's reaction was a mixture of shock and recognition, gasps and exclamations as they processed who they were seeing. But Breakker's expression didn't change. He didn't care who it was. The identity didn't matter to him. Whether it was a former rival seeking revenge, a debuting star trying to make a name, or someone returning from injury with a chip on their shoulder, none of that mattered. They had attacked him, and now they were paying the price. He tossed the mask aside and grabbed the now revealed attacker by the hair, pulling them to their feet. The revealed wrestler tried to mount some offense, throwing desperate punches that lacked power and precision. They were hurt, weakened by the beating they had endured, and their attempts at fighting back were easily brushed aside by Breakker. He caught one of the punches and countered with a devastating headbutt that sent the attacker staggering backward, blood beginning to trickle from their nose. Breakker was in complete control, and he knew it. He was taking his time now, savoring the moment, making sure the beating was thorough and memorable. He whipped the attacker into the ropes and caught them on the rebound with a massive power slam that shook the entire ring. The impact was so violent that it seemed impossible for anyone to kick out, but Breakker didn't even attempt a pin. He wasn't interested in winning the match. He was interested in inflicting punishment. He pulled the attacker up again and positioned them for his finishing move, the gorilla press power slam that he calls the Breakker slam. The crowd rose to their feet, knowing what was coming, anticipating the devastating impact. Breakker lifted his opponent high above his head with ease, military pressing them at full extension, showing off his incredible strength. He held them there for several seconds, letting the moment build, letting everyone in the arena appreciate the height and the danger. Then he drove them down with maximum force. The Breakker slam connected with earth-shattering impact, the sound of body meeting canvas echoing through the arena like a gunshot. The attacker's body bounced from the force before settling motionless on the mat. The crowd erupted, the roar of approval almost overwhelming. Breakker stood over his fallen opponent, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his face, looking every bit the dominant force he had claimed to be. But still, he didn't go for the pin. He reached down and pulled the barely conscious attacker to their feet once more. The referee was trying to intervene now, checking on the welfare of the defeated wrestler, but Breakker brushed him aside. He wanted to deliver one more message, one more exclamation point on this statement of dominance. He positioned the attacker for a second Breakker slam, lifting them once again high above his head. This time there was no pause for dramatic effect. He immediately drove them down with even more force than before, the second slam somehow more devastating than the first. The attacker's body went completely limp upon impact, and medical personnel began rushing down the entrance ramp, clearly concerned about the level of damage being inflicted. Finally, Breakker placed one boot on the chest of his defeated opponent. The referee, despite his concerns, had no choice but to count. 1, 2, 3. The match was over, though calling it a match felt almost inappropriate. It had been an execution, a systematic destruction of someone who had dared to challenge Bron Breakker. His music hit, but it was almost unnecessary.